Hello and welcome, I'm SimUK, and it is my goal to provide to you the most honest, fact-based critical reviews on YouTube. If you find this review helpful, then please hit that like button, subscribe, and help to support the channel by donating via the links below. Thank you so much, and enjoy the review. Hunting simulation has been dominated by one single game for a long time. The only serious contender for the crown was Hunting Simulator from the dev team Neopica, which released in 2017 with mixed reviews. Hunting Simulator 2 from the same developers is due to release on the 16th of July 2020, and it looks to win over some influence with the introduction of some much wanted features, most notably the four-legged companion. Full disclosure, I received a free key in order to make this review, but I didn't receive a single penny in payment. I am reviewing an early access beta version, so this is not necessarily a full representation of the final product, and I hope that any feedback I provide in this review is beneficial for you, the buyer, and also for the devs, in order for them to make any necessary changes to improve the overall gaming experience that Hunting Simulator 2 will provide. So the full review then. Hunting Simulator 2 is a very raw hunting experience. There is no career, no dialogue, and no targets. You can visit all of the locations right from the very start and buy all of the guns and additions without restriction, except of course that they all cost money, and I absolutely love this approach. Except that I don't think the price on things is necessarily realistic. A 4x scope for a gun seems to be very cheap, whereas a pair of binoculars are extremely expensive. The only way to earn money in Hunting Simulator 2 is to sell your kills or trophies. The game starts you off with 5,000 coins or credits and one unlimited free license of your choosing, and I highly recommend you pick something easy to start with. You also get a basic gun, but without sights. In order to shoot any animal, you will need to buy a license, which will give you the permission to shoot a set number of that one type of animal. It may be 1 kill or 4 kills or a variation. This license only applies within a single location. You will need to repurchase it after you've hit the limit. And if you run out of money, you are effectively stuck, except for the basic gun that you get at the beginning and that one free license that you own.
Stay, and don't make a sound.
The biggest and by far the most impressive aspect of Hunting Simulator 2 is the introduction of man's best friend. You can tell your dog to track, call your dog to you, and give the stay command. You can also praise and pat the dog, which will help them improve faster, as each dog has 3 skill sets which over time improve and make them more efficient. This little chap, or lassie, totally transforms the gameplay experience, and having been subjected to a hunt with no dog and no scope on my gun, I can wholeheartedly confirm that hunting with them both is vastly better.
Fetch, and bring it back to me. Who's a good doggy? Stay in position.
There's also a feature. It allows you to send your dog into some long grass and chase out any poultry. Now, I did this once by accident, but other than that one time, I haven't been able to repeat it. It's a cool feature. I just need to work out how it works. I think it's all dependent on where you are. You need to be standing within close proximity of a long grassed area with some appropriate animals hidden inside. The dog can search and find tracks whilst you walk and scan the horizon. Unfortunately, despite being able to bark, the dog doesn't seem to bark in order to alert you when it's found something. Rather, a message pops up on the HUD which you may or may not always spot. Dogs can also lose a trail and get lost, especially when they're starting out. If you manage to re-find the track yourself, you can always set them going again, or you can get them to re-find it. The dog, I find, is most effective when tracking an animal that you've already hit. I know from experience that hit animals can just carry on endlessly. There is a lot more to discuss about the dog, and I will do that in a bit, but needless to say, it's the unique selling point of this game, and it really makes it. It really does turn it into a much better game than it would be without the dog. Your base is the lodge, and whilst you cannot interact with anything, or even decorate as you would want, it looks really nice, and it is somewhere for you to keep your weapons, your accessories, your clothing, and of course, any trophies that you would decide to keep. There's also a bed there, and this allows you to venture out at certain times, which is important in order to track certain animals. You only have a choice between morning, afternoon, and evening, but it's better than nothing. There are restrictions to what you can hunt. Firstly, you will need a license for each animal on each location. So that is one license per animal per location. They don't cross over, and there is a limit to how many you can shoot. And for some species, you are only permitted to hunt for males. In addition, and in a rather clumsy software design kind of way, for each animal that you kill and do not bag, you will also receive a fine. The same thing happens if you shoot an animal too many times, or with the wrong caliber. Now, I don't know how many is too many, but it seems that 5 hits but still alive is permitted, but sometimes 2 is too many. So I think the caliber of bullet is relevant to the number of times you shoot an animal. If you fail to adhere to the restrictions implied, you will find that you cannot bag your kill, and when you leave to return to the lodge, you will then be fined. I have no idea how much you get fined, but they're quite happy to take your current financial situation down to 0 without any concern for your future progression whatsoever. I honestly think the fine aspect is a great idea, but I feel that maybe you should still get to keep the trophy. Perhaps you cannot sell it and the fine should be very high, but the way it is, it's not necessarily conducive to realism or immersion. The fact that you cannot carry more than one caliber, and there are no reference points whilst you're hunting, mistakes will often be made. From the lodge, you can access any of the locations, and each location is unique in terms of environment, look, and wildlife. You can explore the vast and visually impressive maps and discover towers, hides, and more. Discovering these allows you to fast travel to that location, but there is no option to set up your own tents, for example, which adds some realism in some ways, but also lacks some realism in the sense that you cannot set up and resupply or switch loadouts from your tent. When you initially bag a kill, it won't give you any details about it at all. That information will only be available after you return to the cabin. There's a central hub located in each location, and there you can collect your bagged trophies. If you fail to collect them, they will disappear, and I think you may even be fined. Kills can be sold or kept and displayed in your lodge, but selling them is a critical part of the game as money is scarce. Graphically, each location is very different between Texas, Colorado, and Europe. This seemingly endless desire to have game represented on all platforms is, in my opinion, making potentially great games like this less graphically rich, which for the PC players is probably going to be a problem. We don't spend thousands on our rigs so that we can play Nintendo Switch ports. That being said, if this is a Nintendo Switch port, then this is definitely one of the better ones. Now, this is still in early access beta, so expect changes, but there are some notable graphical issues. On max graphical settings, at distance, you can clearly see massive areas of square tiles or unrendered textures. You will find yourself and your dog underground often, as landmass vanishes before your very eyes, and it will only become visible when you're zoomed in. I believe this to be an LOD issue. And that is another issue actually, the transition when zooming in. It's absolutely horrible. I do not like it at all. It requires considerable smoothing, and the whole thing just doesn't work. There are 33 animal types, which are all okay. Some are better than others in terms of animation, and I'm a little split on their overall appearance. I think what they were going for here was a ruggedy fur look, and to a point they did succeed. But the more you look at it, the more you can see issues with it. And again, the textures here are not necessarily impressive enough, especially on ultra graphics. Now the guns themselves I think are nicely modelled, but the lighting kind of make them look a little bit plastic to me. Perhaps it comes down to the textures again, but the lodge itself certainly is a nice addition to the game. Although it would have been nice to be able to play a game of chess with a multiplayer companion. Sadly, that's not going to be an option in this game. Physics and realism are so important for a simulator, and this game seems to be confused in that regard. On the most part, this game screams arcade with the hit markers and the overall implementation, but it's also realistically hard, with animals being incredibly difficult to locate, especially when trying to track the same animal after one successful hunt already. Animals do leave tracks that you can follow, something which apparently was missing from the first edition, and whilst footprints, half-eaten vegetation and leftovers are visible cues that you can literally follow even with all the assists turned off, realistic they are not. For example, you see a whitetail, you get a good shot on it, and it runs off into the trees. Time to start tracking. And you will be surprised to learn, as I was, that a recently injured deer fleeing for its life will still stop off at the local KFC for a bit of corn on the cob. Not very realistic at all. Now, I'm also not convinced that wind speed or bullet drop really exists in this game. The scopes and the overall gun mechanics seem incredibly simplified, with the hit mechanics and hit feedback information desperately lacking in information as well. With a very arcadey looking interface overall, I'm not a big fan of this, I've got to be honest. It deserves a far more polished and professional interface.
Go! Follow that trail!
Distancing is a very binary implementation. 200 yards and you can hear the animal, 150 yards and they can smell you if the wind is not in your favour. Anything below 100 yards and you risk being spotted or heard, and I'm never sure which it is to be honest. There seems to be very little feedback regarding the noise that you make and how visible you are. You can quite literally run full pace until you hear an animal that you're searching for, that's say 200 yards away, and then start to hunt properly. If you stray too far from your dog, it will disengage the track that it has found and start searching nearby for another one, which might very well be a track that you're not interested in, and at times the dog will suddenly run past you and spook your target. Using the stay command for the dog is essential. And while sprinting is actually limited by stamina, a great feature which improves over time, I wish they did more with that, walking itself is frustratingly slow and the head bob animation is horrible. I turned mine off and it looks much better.
Who's a good dog?
Quite simply, I feel there needs to be another speed between sprint and walk, a faster walk for just getting around. I would recommend being able to holster your gun on your shoulder and have another turn of pace in between sprint and the current walking speed. And at the moment, the gun just disappears into your rucksack and that looks terrible. I think that needs to be changed completely. Now in each of the maps you have unique ambient audio and I've got to say it's pretty authentic, if maybe a little repetitive. It's extremely loud though, so I highly recommend that you turn it down by about 50%. Each location has its own audio combinations, and it does do a reasonable job of sounding like the real place. Unfortunately, there are also audio gaps all over the place, far too many to mention, but to name just a few: walking through trees is totally silent. There is no jump button in this game, but if you run off a cliff and fall, that makes no sound at all in any way. And walking itself is devoid of any realism. No twig snapping, no rustling of leaves. It's just got lots of gaps. As a result of the clunky controls, which I will discuss in greater detail in a moment, the lack of detailed visuals and the minimal audio that's available in this game means that it lacks immersion. I have enjoyed playing the game, and I have also been frustrated by the game. And to be honest with you, it would only take a few small changes to drastically improve this game. Things like being able to walk a little faster, putting your gun away, and, well, the most important thing is the controls, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. Another thing I'd like to see improved in terms of audio is the gun audio. It's drastically weak. These are big guns firing big caliber rounds, but they sound a little bit like a BB gun. I think more needs to be done in that regard. The animal audio, I've got to say, is absolutely spot on, and the coolers that you can buy and take around with you, they are superb as well. There's a lot going for this game, but there's quite a bit that needs to be tidied up. Hunting Simulation 2's biggest frustration for PC players is going to be its controls. Animations cannot be interrupted, so if you're blowing a deer caller and one pops his head out straight in front of you, you will have to wait for the animation to finish before you can do anything else, like pulling out your gun. Hunting Simulation 2 also lacks keybinds for actions, relying instead on the use of these pop-up radial menus, which was clearly designed and tested on a controller. So if you're planning on using a controller, then this particular issue won't affect you very much. But if you're thinking of using a keyboard and mouse like I did, you'll find it simply doesn't work well at all. The problem is, when you are walking and you want to switch an item, let's say a deer caller or a wind puffer, you will need to open this radial menu. But as you are walking around, your mouse moves around the screen in the background. You can't see it, but it is still moving around on the screen. So when the radial menu opens, you will have no idea where your mouse is going to be, and in effect, you have to guess where your mouse is. Now, if you try to do something quickly, this is incredibly frustrating, and the more you do it, the more annoying it becomes. The simple fix is that the game needs to automatically center your mouse every single time that you open the radial menu, and that would add the current lacking consistency. Worse than that, when you switch items or issue a command to your dog, it will stop you from walking. So once you have selected your choice, you will then have to release and repress the walk button. In a 2-hour hunt, that can get annoying really fast. I think it would work so much better if we could just use the scroll wheel in order to select a weapon or an item. Better still, if we had keybinds to select each item individually, and keybinds to be able to tell your dog to sit, wait, come, find, etc. If we had keybinds implemented for the dog, we could actually use third-party software and issue commands to the dog by using our voice. That would require something like voice attack or similar, but that would be amazing and add so much to the immersion. However, this is trying to accommodate console players as well as PC players, so despite the fact that we have a plethora of keybind options available to us, console players won't. So it would have to be an optional keybind system. I really think they should consider doing it for PC players.
Go on.
Customization in-game exists, but it's not in abundance. It certainly offers up enough items, with over 160 weapons, add-on items, attachments and clothing. The weapons include rifles, shotguns and bows, and they all behave fairly realistically, with a heavy lean towards simplified arcade gameplay. Hunting Simulator 2, as I've already mentioned, lacks multiplayer. Now, the multiplayer version in Hunting Simulator 1 was not received very well at all. This time, there is no multiplayer at all. This really is not going to be a positive for the title, and it will certainly be a negative omission for many players.
Go. Follow that trail.
In order to pre-order Hunting Simulator 2, you're going to be looking at £35 to £45, depending on where you buy and which selection you choose. I can only say what I personally would be prepared to pay, and to be honest with you, on this one in its current state, I think £25 would be my happy limit. I could push to 30. At the end of the day, it's the arcadey nature of the game, the control system or lack thereof for PC players especially, and the overall lack of realism and depth, which makes this game difficult for me to become immersed and ultimately to enjoy. Now let me be clear, nothing about Hunting Simulator 2 is particularly bad. It rather just falls short of being good, with the exception of the dog, which is in contrast absolutely fantastic in pretty much every single area. Overall, Hunting Simulator 2 has this arcade feel about it, but it's combined with some really difficult hardcore and realistic elements of simulation, yet it doesn't quite feel like a simcade either. It just seems a bit confused. I'm not sure I understand who their target audience is. Are they aiming this at younger kids or console players? I'm not sure. In my estimation, Hunting Simulator, as the name suggests, should be as realistic as possible, including bullet drop, wind shear, etc. Or perhaps it should consider changing its name to Hunting Game, which if you think about it is actually a very clever name for a hunting simulator. The in-game controls are poorly implemented for PC players looking to use keyboard and mouse, and the complete lack of keybinds and many of the graphical issues will mean that PC players will probably not be all that impressed. If they release on Steam with it as it is today, as I've experienced it, I think they're going to get a bit of a backlash. To be fair though, those initial issues that I discovered do exist, but it is possible to look past them and actually get a lot of fun and a lot of rewards from the game itself. The gun mechanics seem really dumbed down, and for me they're far too simplistic, and the in-game audio has many gaps, as does movement for the player. And although wind direction does seem to be spot on, and I'm not kidding you, if you're within 200 meters of an animal and the wind is blowing towards them, they are going to run off before you even clap eyes on them. The noise you make and how visible you are, again, seems to be really binary. There's no middle ground, and there appears to be no feedback to tell you how visible and how noisy you are. And even sometimes trying to take cover doesn't seem to do anything. It's a bit hit and miss, that aspect of the game. Now, despite pointing out all the issues in the game, which by the way is my job as a reviewer, I do not hate Hunting Simulator 2. In fact, I actually really quite enjoyed playing it. I do feel that with just a few small tweaks, it could be so much better. What seems to have happened here is, with the exception of the dog, which I cannot reiterate enough times, is absolutely amazing. And to be honest with you, I would have preferred to see them introduce more new features like the dog, perhaps a horse or the need to eat, drink and sleep. Much more could have been done with this whole game, and the money side of things could have been a lot deeper and a lot more involved. But instead, everything just feels similar, yet simplified. And the real problem, I think, for a lot of people is going to be the lack of multiplayer and the graphics. Hopefully, the devs will see this review. Hopefully, the content and the information that I've put in here will encourage them to look at these things again. They're probably absolutely fine for console players, but from a PC perspective, I think this game needs some more work still. This is early access beta. Hopefully they've got enough time. They've got 2 weeks or so, nearly 3 weeks, in order to fix these bugs and issues. And I hope they do, because underneath all of the problems and the issues, the visual issues and the audio issues, this is a very enjoyable and very rewarding game. It's just not a simulator right now. Anyway, thanks very much. I hope this review has been helpful for you. Please hit the like button and take care of yourselves. Until next time, goodbye.